Hi everybody, this is Heidi from Healing Harvest Homestead, and today I'm thrilled to be able to share with you how we make our own aspirin at home. Okay, so what I use is willow bark, and I like to use white willow bark. The Latin name for this plant is Salix alba, and that is going to give you the most powerful natural aspirin. Okay. The reason it works, let's talk about the reason why willow bark works so well. It contains salicin, amongst other great constituents like polyphenols and flavonoids and things like that. But the salicin actually turns to a salicylate in your system, which is actually what aspirin does. Okay, in fact, aspirin was created by the Bayer company back, I believe, at the turn of the century, and they extracted this chemical from the willow bark and they created aspirin. So the only problem is that they also stripped out all the other chemical constituents that work together with the active chemical in this bark that helps relieve pain. So what's happened over the years is that aspirins and other non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, especially the toxic chemical ones, like acetaminophen, for example, those are terribly bad for your liver, but they also have side effects. And your willow bark isn't going to have the same side effects. In fact, you can look up on the National Institute of Health, which is nih.gov.com, and there's a great article on willow bark and how it is much safer and has no side effects, basically, whereas as opposed to the over-the-counter medications. So my husband and I have been using this tincture, that's what we're going to make today, is a tincture, for years, and this is all we use. You will not find any aspirin or Tylenol or any kind of a pain reliever in our house except for this, and then some other herbs that we use too if it's a really strong pain. Willow bark tincture is excellent for minor headaches. It's excellent for just calming inflamed areas like sore muscles. It's great for your lower back, which I know because that's how I learned about it and started using it, because I injured my back several years ago. And I basically don't have the pains anymore, so that's great. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and show you today how to make your own willow bark tincture. Now, if you're interested in learning more about tinctures, you can go to my website, www.healingharvesthomestead.com, and I've got tons and tons of herbal articles. In fact, if you go to the navigation bar, I've got a whole series on how to start using herbs, okay? That's really helpful to get you started. But anyhow, this is one of the first tinctures I ever made, and I love it, okay? But here's how you make it. So you start with your willow bark, which I have a big jar here because I just purchased some new bark. Now, we have willow trees on our property. I'll be honest, I don't know what the species is, and so if we were in a survival crisis or something like that, I would absolutely use the bark from our trees. However, we're not in a survival crisis, so I purchase my willow bark sustainably from Star West Botanicals or from Mountain Rose Herbs. Those are my two usual places to purchase. You can also get it online at Amazon in bulk, so you can look for it there. So what you're going to do, I'm just going to show you with this one because I have a half gallon of willow bark tincture here. I don't really need any more right now. So what you're going to do here is you are going to fill your jar. This is a half gallon jar. You don't need to start with this much. In fact, if you're just starting out using herbs, I recommend starting with small jars, like a pint, okay, perhaps a quart, but really a quart of tincture is going to last you a really long time if you have few people in your family, or if it's just like one or two people using it. So start out with a small amount. You don't need to have a ton. All right, well, you're going to fill your jar about halfway full with your bark, and then you're going to take some vodka. You can use 80 proof, however, for barks, higher proof, like 100 proof or a little higher, is very good. And you're going to fill the jar to within an inch of the top, and then you're going to put a lid on it. And be sure you label it so you know what's in it. And you're going to shake it, okay? And then you're going to let it macerate or sit. I like to put mine in a window for a few weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. And then you're going to strain it off, which is what we're going to do right now. All right? So I'm going to take my raw willow bark, I'm going to set it aside, and I'm going to take my processed willow bark tincture that still contains the bark in it, and I'm going to show you how we strain that off. Alrighty. So what you want to do is you want to get a strainer, and it needs to be size appropriate. So if you have a pint jar, you can use a smaller strainer. If you have a quart jar, I suggest a medium-sized strainer. And since I'm dealing with a huge half-gallon mason jar, I've got quite a large strainer and quite a large Pyrex pitcher. These are my two of my favorite herbal tools. The nice thing about being an herbalist is that you don't need a lot of fancy tools. You need a few basic things. You probably already have them in your kitchen, and you know what? You're good to go. So now I'm just going to simply strain this off, and look how beautiful and brown that liquid is. It's strong. It's going to be a nice tincture. I'm going to take this and just dump that herb right into my Pyrex jar. The nice thing about willow, some herbs will hold on to moisture, and they'll just really swell. Willow bark is actually very nice because the liquid strains out really well. Okay, it dries out quickly, and you know, you're not left dealing with a whole bunch of excess liquid left in your mark, which wastes alcohol, and alcohol is expensive, right? So you want to get as much of that tincture out as possible. So there we go. Now once you get your tincture out, or strained out, you can set your strainer aside. I probably would have let that sit for about 5 or 10 more minutes, possibly longer depending on the herb. But like I said, willow bark strains really quickly. And now I can go ahead and pour my tincture into bottles. I have another half-gallon bottle sitting here, and I'm just going to go ahead and, what do I have here, about 5.5 cups. So I have more cups than we'll take to fill a quart. So I'm going to go ahead and just use another half-gallon jar. Pour this in. One thing about this super extra large Pyrex pitcher, I wish they had put a bit of a bigger lip on it, because sometimes you have to pour it just right, or the liquid sometimes drizzles out a little bit. Alrighty, here we go. Look at that, beautiful. Another nice thing about willow bark when you're tincturing it is there's very little residue, so it's really nice. And here I have 3/4 of a half-gallon, a quart and a half probably, of willow bark tincture. All right, so now let's talk about how to actually bottle it up for use. This is how I'm going to store it in my herb, we have a storeroom down here, but I store all my tinctures in a dark, cool room. It's the coolest room, it's the darkest room in the house, because heat and light and air, oxygen, they destroy your herbal preparations. This tincture, if it's stored correctly, will easily last up to 5-10 years. I have been using tinctures I've made 5 years ago, and they're still just as good. So that's another great plus to tinctures. They really don't go bad. So they're just handy, you know. So to bottle this up, oops, I am going to take a little measurement, and I've got a small funnel here, and I've got some 2-ounce dropper bottles. You can see these. They've got a little dropper bottle, or a little glass dropper on them. And this is 2 ounces. You can get these in 1 ounce and 4 ounce sizes as well with the dropper bottles. And so if you use a lot of this willow tincture, you might want to get a 4 ounce size. And I'm going to take a little scoop and scoop some of this out. Take my funnel, I've got a small funnel, and I'm going to pour this in to my little 2 ounce jar. One thing you want to do when you're working with your tinctures is be sure your materials are very, very clean. you know, you can see me dipping this in here. I wouldn't do that if this wasn't spotlessly clean and sanitized. So, all right. And there we go. I have a little bit too much tincture in here. I'm going to make up 2 2-ounce bottles. I'm giving this away to a friend of mine. So just share that. Let's talk about how to use this now, all right? Dosing your tinctures is something that can be a bit variable. It depends on the size of the person. It depends on the strength of the tincture. It depends on the quality of the herbs that you're using. Really, you know, dosing depends on a lot of different things. But your standard dose is for a 150-pound person, and generally speaking, you're going to use 3 full droppers. Now, this is actually a full dropper, even though the liquid is only about halfway up. I don't know if you can see that. Halfway up the dropper, because they've standardized the droppers as well as they can. Generally, a dropper full, as you know, as high as you can squeeze it, is between 30 and 35 drops of tincture. And you're going to use 3 of these. 3 of these is the equivalent of 1/2 teaspoon. All right. Now, if you're a huge man and you weigh a couple hundred pounds, you might want to use a little more. If you're a tiny woman and you weigh 100 pounds and you're 5 foot tall, you don't want to use this much. All right. But if you're an average-sized person, this amount, 1/2 teaspoon or 3 full droppers is just fine. You're going to simply squirt it under your tongue. Let it stay there as long as you can, because what will happen is, because the herb is extracted in the alcohol, it's going to get absorbed into the mucous membranes of your mouth very quickly, all right? And it can start working really fast. So, and then you just swallow the rest, or you just swallow it when you're done holding it in your mouth for a minute. That's basically how you use your willow bark tincture. So this is how you make, or this is how, you know, you can make, or we do make our own natural aspirin. I will never go back to using over-the-counter drugs. A, this is cheaper. B, you don't have the side effects. And C, it's super, 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 super easy, right? So anyhow, this is Heidi at Healing Harvest Homestead. If you're interested in becoming a home herbalist and making your own home remedies, I do have a course. You can find it at teachable.com. Just go ahead and search Healing Harvest Homestead, or you can go to my blog. There's tons of information over there that's totally free. I have a Facebook group called Practical Herbs with Heidi, where I support people in learning about using herbs safely and effectively. I'd love to have you join us over there. And please subscribe to my channel. This is a new channel, and I'm trying to get it going, and I'd love to have you subscribe. All right, have a good day.